The Perfect Quit. I hope I've enticed you a little bit on the title of this episode because we're going to talk about how to quit an assignment today. And I know it's going to make some people on my side of the industry a little bit upset, but we've got to talk about this because things are so different now than they ever have been. I want to give you my advice on how to handle some things that I wouldn't have said even 2 years ago. But we're going to talk about the perfect quit on this week's edition of Travel Evolved. It's Travel Evolved. I am Mark Holloway. Welcome, everyone, to the episode. Welcome to the West Coast. Got my little starfish pillow here, looks like, so I'm all good to go. Looking forward to being out here for a little while. I enjoy being in this office. It's something I look forward to. I do love Colorado as much as I love California, but it was time, and I'm really glad to be out here because so it's just a different vibe out here, and it's a vibe I need, and just as much as I need my snow and my change of seasons, and I'll be ready for that here in the fall. But for right now, looking forward to having some fun out here. So there'll be some noises like some motorcycles on the PCH. There'll be some helicopters flying by over the next few weeks and months. We'll just deal with it as it comes. It's not quite the studio that we want to have, but we're gonna get through it. So anyway, the perfect quit. What am I talking about? Listen, here's what I'm first gonna say. I can't believe I'm having this episode because I don't even think me, and I like talking about things that other people don't necessarily want to jump into. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of topics that people that are CEOs of companies are like, they're just scared to talk about. I want to talk about that. This one kind of surprises me that I want to talk about because it happens to me too. Listen, travelers bail on assignments. And many of you have justifiable reasons for doing so. Many of you don't have justifiable reasons for doing so. It's just kind of the thing that's happening. I don't know if it's more because there's so many brand new travelers in the industry right now. There has been before. For many of you, this industry hasn't changed a bit because you're brand new in it. There's nothing wrong with that. But for most of you, or a lot of you, you have seen the changes I'm talking about, which means obviously just rates going insanely high, demand going insanely high, travelers making crazy money, complaining about taxes and how much money they're making, how much money the government was taking, and all of a sudden then there's too many of you in the industry. We want to hide and protect the jobs that we want. Don't let anybody else get them. There was that. Travelers that were jumping into the rink that were making some veteran travelers upset because they knew it was short-lived. And people were leaving because the jobs got super thin. Crazy amount of supply, less and less demand. So it's been a wild couple of years. And I really would say it's been wild. I mean, nobody in our side of the industry, or even on your side of the industry, predicted that even when things started getting kind of rough, that there would be the amount of money and how lucrative it could be. Obviously, most of this was not free. As I say, in our industry, nothing is free. Almost all of you worked really, really hard for it, or at least had some risks involved, whether it was family risk or personal health risk. It all kind of came into play. And I mean, I have talked to travelers who've said, maybe at the very beginning, but for most of the time that I was making crazy money, it was just a normal assignment for me. So there's that too. There's that aspect that some of you had. Not all of you. It really depends upon where you were, what your specialty was, how prepared and well ran the facility was. But like I said many weeks ago, maybe months ago by now, a lot of people made a ton of money. The last thing I thought I would be talking about would be explaining how to walk off an assignment, how to quit an agency, how to quit a hospital system. But it just is part of the industry right now. And I think, again, in Travel Evolve, for us not to at least openly talk about something that I don't really want to talk about it. Listen, I don't want any of my travelers listening to my episode and saying, hey, I know exactly how to quit Mark and his company now, right? But I would really rather you listen to this and do it this way, or at least have some considerations before you do it, because things have changed on our end too. Things are going to continue to change, and we're going to jump into a lot of this here in a minute. But I think to openly talk about the fact that it's the last episode I think most people on my side of the industry want me to talk about, because nobody wants you to even consider quitting. No one wants you to think that there's an option to walk away. Matter of fact, a lot of agencies put language and threatening posturing in their conversations, in their contracts, to get you to make sure that you are hopefully not going to do this. We're going to talk a lot about contracts. We have an episode coming up. I'm going to preview that for you guys. There's a whole episode we're going to deal with agency contracts. I'm going to try to walk you through some of the language I see, what's enforceable. I mean, it all is enforceable, but how enforceable, how likely they are to go after you. We're going to have that kind of fun episode here coming up. So that's another one that was done many, many months ago. But for today, I just want to briefly talk about the fact that I get it. Agencies don't want you to quit. You probably don't necessarily want to quit if you can help it. It still happens. These things exist, especially right now in the last few years with how many agencies have jumped into travel healthcare. I think it makes it easier for people to say, I'm going to burn my bridge with that company, with that facility, with that system, with that vendor, and think less of it. And there's, again, I'm not forming an opinion. There may or may not be anything wrong with that. But we're going to talk about it and to prepare you for some of the things that are exactly that. There's nothing wrong with it in some cases, and there could be a lot of things wrong with it in other cases. So the perfect quit. I'm really surprised I'm doing the episode, though. It was just one of those that came up. Here's the deal. God, I hate saying that phrase, but our industry, let me rephrase that, lends itself to quitting from a traveler standpoint. There are so many companies that pop up, and like I've said and documented, well documented on Travel Evolve so many times, most of them are just the same. Most agencies are incredibly similar. We have the same jobs, we have the same pay rates basically, we have the same processes. I understand, and I think anybody from my side of the desk that's upset about me doing this episode would understand that it is easy to walk away from XYZ company and go to ABC company or vice versa. It just truly is, because as a traveler, what are you really walking away from? And we'll talk about what you are walking away from. And for many of you, it's not a big deal. And I fully support that decision, which, again, may surprise a lot of you. Just the fact that our industry is contractual by nature, that there is so much competition with facilities that need you, with vendors that want to have agencies have you work through them, and agencies that want you to work for you, or for them, I should say, is really what it comes down to. It just lends itself to people saying, I'm just going to bail. You guys know travelers that do that. You guys also know, and many of you know, the travelers that absolutely categorically will not quit an assignment. But I think there is a way to do a perfect quit if you're going to do one. So our industry is full of this. It lends itself to it, just part of the nature of what we do. And what we do is we contract staffing in hospitals, which means you're on a contract. And I think just by nature, being on a contract says, I may or may not stick with this contract. And that's not unique in healthcare. It's unique in contractual work, right? So here's what we know. There are so many agencies, and it feels like, for a while there, one was springing up every other day, including mine. Like, let's be honest, mine's not very old. I won't tell you when I started. It doesn't really matter, but I will down the road here. But formulating and all that kind of stuff, years, right? Number of years. There was a ton of us that came into the industry. Most people came into the industry out of the blue with either some sort of similar background or a spin-off of healthcare staffing, travel nursing, or travel allied, or both. And there were some people that came completely opposite and didn't have any clue what they were doing. You got your whole mix, and a lot of you have reported to me over the last few years kind of what it was like working for some of them. There's also so many assignments, right? There was every facility that even 3 years ago, rarely had a census increase in some small town that, I guess that the travelers, if there was even any travelers, were there probably wasn't even travelers. That's a great example. Not even needing travelers in some facilities because they were fully staffed and had been for years and didn't plan on having any kind of change in people's careers. All of a sudden, needed travelers. So assignments that didn't even have needs or barely had needs here and there, those facilities went crazy. Assignments that had needs that went to the 11th extreme on having needs went crazy. There was just a huge, and still is, a huge number of assignments. What I'm noticing right now, and I'll just pause for a minute, things are picking back up again. I said there, be ready for the dip. We had the dip. Right now, what I'm noticing, again, is I think that we're going to be ending up doing this episode close to either July 1st or the end of June. I don't know when. It's mid-June right now when we're recording this, so it'll be coming up relatively soon. What I'm seeing over the early part of June is the number of positions are starting to increase steadily. Not, a big sweep, but every day there, and I track this stuff. For those of you who know me, I track everything. More and more positions. So if I'm graphing it, it's definitely showing a steady increase, has been for the last probably month. And we saw a dramatic decrease nationally sometime basically in middle to late winter up until the spring. So rates plummeted, as we know. They are holding steady at, I think, a fairly strong bill rate. When I'm talking about rates, I always talk about bill rates because how I feel about pay rates. They're all over the place, and I can't predict what your particular agency is going to offer. It could be a good pay rate, it could be a bad rate. But the bill rates are holding steady. Yeah, everybody that extended, typically at your assignment, or if you went from one to the other, you started looking at assignments that were in a certain part of the country, you noticed that the bill rates, again, qualifying, the bill rates were dropping. And they did. But they dropped to a level that I think is pretty darn solid right now. Again, if you go back to 2019, 2018, way higher than that. So I think there's nothing to complain at this point about. For those of you that are used to the insane money and didn't think it was going to go away, I don't think you really thought that through, because if you talk to anybody that had been doing this for any length of time, they would have probably told you this isn't going to last. And it's not going to last. It didn't. But again, it is holding steady at a really solid financial annual income, depending upon what part of the country and what your specialty is. You can still make a ton of money, and a lot more than a staff, healthcare professional in most all cases. So that's what we're kind of right now. And I'm just going to want to sidetrack for a while. So the number of positions are, I think, steadily kind of going up. They sometimes do in the summertime, and then they kind of trickle down in the early fall, and then cold and flu season picks up and they pick up again, and then there's that seasonality aspect that we talk all about here. Supply and demand, it all comes into play. But right now, here in mid-June, and I'm assuming we'll get into the 4th of July holiday, things are starting to increase as far as the number of needs, which means it looks like the needs aren't getting met. There's more needs out there. I'm guessing there's less competition, which means there's less supply. Many travelers that were in it for a little while, or were getting close, or maybe made a ton of money and were lucky and fortunate enough to be able to retire earlier, got what they wanted out of that last couple of years. It's creating some room for others that want to make some great money. So that's wonderful, and that's really good. So many different positions, so many different companies, so many different types of assignments that it just has been a luxury for a lot of travelers to be able to say, hey, I can pick and choose and burn my bridge, or go here or go there, and quit and walk away from an assignment when I want to. So part of the question that I want to kind of phrase to you is, when you're looking at the perfect quit and you're really saying, and again, I don't want to get into details as to why on this episode you might be wanting to quit. We've had episodes, go back to one of my first episodes with my good friend Melanie, where we talked about how to get through a tough assignment. That still episode holds play, but if you're at a point where you're not going to get through this assignment, that's where this episode kind of comes in. So what are the best hospital systems? What are the best facility systems out there? It really depends. If you're a dialysis nurse and you're looking at certain dialysis heavy clinics or systems, if you like a certain hospital system, and I know there's many of you that care for one or don't care for one or two over everybody else, or really are favorite on one or two. That makes total sense to me. It has a lot to do with everything from the charting systems that they use, their processes, just the way their hospital, their facilities ran. And I'm not going to mention names, but we know the ones that people tend to be a little bit down on, let's say, so to speak. So you have to really think about that. What system are you working for? What's the best agencies out there? What makes an agency great? Again, when you're working for a certain travel company, one of the things you have to think about is what is it that makes an agency a great agency? My answer always, I really think there's two things, and this is just my opinion, so you guys may have it. And this is what I love about our industry is that every single person has a different reason for traveling. Every single person has a different thing that makes them tick, which makes me think that almost every traveler has a different reason for choosing an assignment and potentially an agency to represent them at that assignment. But I personally believe that there's two things that really make an agency great. One of them is an agency that has a whole ton of positions. I mean, I think there's nothing to argue about that. If you are a huge company and you literally have a job almost everywhere, that's a pretty good feather in that cap. In other words, you're not constantly having to switch agencies because this agency will take care of you. I've got a job almost everywhere. I can't argue with that. It makes sense. And I think the other agencies are the ones that pay top dollar for the positions that they have, which means if you have an agency that has a job that you want, let's say it's that one of the big companies and they're paying great for it, you've got the best of both worlds right there. Bad news, as you guys know, is what we sometimes see is the bigger the agency, the less they pay. And I've explained in many episodes prior to this one why oftentimes that is. They've got higher internal costs with more and more people for payroll, more and more people for onboarding and credentialing, certainly more and more recruiters, more and more account managers to make sure they're managing those vendors and those hospitals. Of course, more vice presidents walking around making sure all of those people are doing their jobs properly. A lot more senior management, which means the margins are thinner because they got to pay all those people for the same basic job. But they've got them. So I haven't seen that unicorn, which is a huge company with a job everywhere that's the top paying. I mean, if we had that, they'd corner the market, and there'd be no reason for me to be doing this episode because everybody would be happy with them. It doesn't work out that way. So you guys are stuck with kind of those two options. Do I find the assignment I want to go to, or do I find an assignment that pays the top pay? And I think that's what most of you do. You kind of look for where you want to go and then hopefully who's paying for it. I think that's what makes the best agency great. So I think those two things you have to keep them in mind. And I guess I'll just kind of throw my little nugget out there. And I think you have to be very, very careful with the perfect quit from an agency that is an agency that has the positions all the time that you want to go to. That's not a smart move, right? You may be really upset with this particular assignment. You may be really upset with your recruiter or your company, whatever that is. But if you're going to walk away and know that you probably aren't going to be able to work at that potential facility again. And then the same thing applies with a really high-paying company. If you're at one of the top-paying companies in any given assignment and you're going to walk away from that assignment, I'll tell you how to do it. But if you're going to walk away from the company because you're upset with their recruiter or who knows what their situation is, realize that you could be down the road always looking at working alongside somebody that's making more money working for the company that you can't work for anymore because you made the decision. So there are things to think about. None of these are judgment factors on my account. If those two things or that situation, whichever company you're working for, or maybe they don't have either one of those, variables that I think are so important. If who you're working for, then it doesn't matter, right? Walk away less worried about any potential long-term effects it may have on you. Same thing applies with the system in the hospital. That's what I want to get at, is that more and more people are tracking this stuff. I know we do, and I think a lot of agencies do. I know that a lot of facilities do. I have a lot of times when a traveler comes to me and says, oh, I really like this job in this particular city and it's paying the right pay, let's go. And it turns out I can't submit them because they have a ding and they are what's considered a do not use or do not return, which means either was that facility, unlikely, or that system or that entire vendor that said, no, this traveler has burnt their bridge with us on numerous occasions or accepted an assignment and then didn't credential or wasn't committed. A lot of different things that I'm going to continue to talk about today. And they're starting to keep more and more track of this. That's not new. But I am personally seeing it's coming up to bite people a little bit more than as time goes by because they're doing a better job of keeping track of it. A lot of people always question, why do they need my Social Security? I don't want to give my Social Security number out. Well, part of it is for that reason. A Social Security is very traceable. So a number of vendors I know actually require a full social not a date of birth and not just the last 4 digits, but a full social security number to be submitted, because that's the first thing you're going to check is what's the history on this candidate in any place and anywhere that we work with them. Are they, did they quit? Did they get fired? Was there an issue? Was there an attendance problem? Did they never go to work for us? Have they accepted 3 or 4 jobs and never actually gone to any of them? These are things that people are starting to really, really keep track of nowadays. Just kind of know that your actions and what we're about to talk about, I really want you to think about it. Are you 100,000% sure? Make sure this is something you really want to do. And again, I would really reference back to, I don't remember if it was one of my early episodes, and I apologize to Melanie. She did a great job kind of helping us talk about how to get through a tough assignment. I think you should go back and listen to that episode. So like I said, it's one of the first ones. If you're really in a tough situation, and we'll talk a little bit about some examples. I don't want to get into too many because it's really not the point of this episode. But I think there is a little bit of a difference between if you're having trouble with your facility and the assignment, or if you're having trouble with your agency. And I think there's 2 ways to handle it, and I really think it's about communication on both those regards. So if I forget, well, hopefully I won't. I don't think I have that in my notes, but I do want to talk about that a little bit. Well, you know what? Since I will forget, because I've done that before, let's talk about it now. Let's start off with that. If you're having trouble with your agency, I mean, first and foremost, I think you need to get away from the recruiter, and a lot of you guys just hang your hat with a recruiter. And I think that if you're frustrated with that aspect or the communication, you're not getting what you're looking for, you've got to move that up the chain. And if you're working with a company that you can't move up the chain, you're working for the wrong company. Because if you're frustrated about something, whether it's pay or communication with your recruiter, or it doesn't really matter, but a lot of people go through their recruiter for their communication. If you're not getting that from him or her, you've got to go up that chain. And if you can't, then it is the wrong company for you. And I think anybody out there would agree that customer service in our industry from an agency standpoint is still got to remain number one, no matter how big you are or what you're doing. So that's incredibly important. So if you're not getting up that chain of ladder, I would talk it over with my manager of my facility and say, listen, I'm really struggling with my agency. And again, there's where I'm going to make some people mad at our agency. They don't like it when you do that. But it's real. We all have to do a better job. You guys are not a captive audience. This is a free market last time I checked. So if you're upset with your agency and they're doing things wrong repeatedly, I wouldn't say once or twice, but if they're having problems doing something wrong or repeatedly doing different things wrong, it might be time for a new agency. And it's okay to talk to your facility about the fact that you're having trouble. It's nothing that you guys are doing here. I love my assignment. I love working with you. But holy cow, I'm having trouble because I can't get through. I can't talk to my recruiter, or I can't, get anybody else to talk to me about a 15-minute discrepancy on my timesheet, whatever the case may be. It's a weird industry that we're in. A lot of trust, as we talked about, triangle of trust, quadrilateral of trust. So if you're not getting that, then it's okay eventually, if you've exhausted those options, to talk to your manager. And the same thing applies the other way around. If you have a tough assignment and it's just not going to get any better, I think an agency should support you in that. And I think it should be okay on occasion for an agency to say, let's quit. I know it sounds really crazy, and I'm sure that those recruiters out there that think that. But wouldn't that go a long way with you if your agency said, you know what, you shouldn't take any of this garbage. We should walk away and let's get out of there, and protect you to make sure that you're not being, dismissed for any potential future assignment with that vendor or with that hospital, with that system, if in fact there is an issue. I think both those scenarios are important. Communication is really important to those two. I think, again, if you're a decent agency, the first thing you're going to tell your travelers, hey, let's see if we can figure out a way to work this out with some higher ups there. Someone who's communicating the opposite with your facility, with the management team, and somebody else that may be there. But if you're not getting anywhere with that, then it may be time for you to walk away, and hopefully your agency is the one that supports you. So it's like completely opposite, but you guys are the kind of ones that are in charge. Both of those entities have to be doing a very good job for you. And I also think, and this is a good time to bring this up, you really need to look in the mirror and say, is it me? Am I going through traveler burnout? Am I just being tough? Am I a difficult person to work with? Is this career still a good career for me? And sometimes the answer can be no, it's not. You're no longer a good traveler because you're not enjoying this. You're miserable. Every assignment you go to, you're unhappy. And it may not be the fact that you're just picking terrible assignments. It eventually may be that you're done with this portion of your career, and the perfect quit is actually you saying, I'm walking away from traveling, which is okay too. Nothing to be ashamed about. We all get to that point where we know how bohemian and how interesting and how difficult and hopefully how wonderful this career path can be. But it's tough on you. And there's a point where you have to be able to say, maybe it's time, right? And the perfect quit, and I did that purposely with this episode, we talked about it, is it also could be the perfect quit to walk away from the whole thing. So at any rate, that was a lot. You want to quit for the right reasons. And again, this is where I'm not going to go into detail on what those right reasons are. There are some, and you guys know which ones I'm talking about. I was probably just throw some examples out, but I'm not going to. But the right reason shouldn't be that you're not making enough money. You knew what you were going to be making. The right reason shouldn't be because you're not showing up on time, or all of a sudden, what you agreed upon during an interview you're not okay with. There are a lot of reasons why you can talk about the perfect quit, but there are also some that you have to be honest with yourself about. This is really not a reason for me to think that I need to be done with this assignment. One of the things I really want to talk about is I really think one of the first things you should do is absolutely consider all of your options. Quitting, I just believe this, and so here's what I'm going to make a few friends back in my side of the industry, should really probably be your last option. Is there anything else that can be done to help me with whatever I'm dealing with that is making me feel like I cannot finish this assignment? Consider anything that's possible. And I do believe that for whatever reason in our industry, communication is one of the worst ones that doesn't get handled. And I think that if you really think about what could I do, and I know it's not always your job, right? You're the traveler. You're the one that's generating all this revenue for everybody, for the facility to be able to bill insurance companies and Medicare and patients themselves out of their pocket, and the agencies be making money off of basically convincing you to take an assignment with them and not everybody else. It's you're the one generating the revenue. So it seems like the last person that should have to do all the negotiating and communicating is you, but this is also your career. And unfortunately, you're the one that's responsible for whether or not you can get an assignment, fair or unfair. Like I said, you're always going to get the truth from me. It is unfair. I'll throw that out to you. It is unfair that you guys have to do that much work for your own career, but oftentimes you do. And here's one of those things that if you were considering all the options, really think about what it is that you can do, even though you may not feel like you should. Fair enough. But what is it I can do or could do to salvage this and get through this assignment so I can have a perfect quit and walk away without actually having to have the perfect quit and have the perfect end of an assignment that I can't wait to put in my rear view mirror. Okay. Pros and cons of a new position is one of the reasons you should really think about. Do you have something lined up? Are you an incredibly marketable traveler? If you walk away from this one, are you going to go weeks or even longer without a paycheck? What's your finances look like? Have you been able to stock a lot of money away? Do you have something already lined up, or would you have to start from the very get-go? And you guys all know that credentialing is taking longer now, that getting interviews seem to be taking longer. I've got people sitting in front of jobs that have been sitting there for weeks, and they're just finding something else because the vendor isn't moving, the hospital's not moving on them. It's really crazy. And more than I've ever had in my career, the percentage of people that go in front of positions right now and just sit there and the hospital does nothing, it's frustrating. It's like, what are you doing? So is that going to happen to you if you walk away from this assignment? Are you going to be out of a job, and can you be? And weigh that against the pain and anguish you're experiencing that's making you even consider quitting. Does it all make sense? And it may, but it's something you got to really consider. What are the pros and cons of going after a brand new position? Am I going out of the frying pan into the fire? Is it going to be something very, very similar because I'm limited to where I want to go, or my specialty is not in high demand right now? All of these things have to be considerations for you. And especially like we talked about, putting and keeping some money in the bank. Do you have that set aside for rainy day? This is why, as you treat this as a different career, as your whole separate business, this is why you have to have a nest egg, so that if you run into an assignment that is so difficult to get through, you have the option of saying, I can live off this for as short a period as I can, but I can do this because I can't do this anymore, and I'm worried about my license, I'm worried about my career here. So one of the things I always want to recommend, and I thought about this when we were writing up this episode, and I chimed in with this one. I think that if you're giving the perfect quit One of the things that makes it perfect, if you're able to give some kind of a notice. In other words, you're not just walking away. I've seen that so many times. Had it happen recently to us. Disappeared, just walked away. She told the facility she had a family emergency, gone. She will never work for my company again. And that may or may not be a big deal to her, but that is inexcusable for me. Call us, let the agency know that there's an issue. Didn't even do that. So that's what I was talking about earlier. When someone doesn't communicate with us, I'm not interested in giving that person, an opportunity to say, let's have you do that to us again. That tells me that is something that, like, there's too many travelers out there that want to make great money and want good assignments, that it's a decision that individual made that I'm hoping at some point they might regret, but they probably won't. But is there an option to give some notice? Can I talk to somebody and communicate and actually give somebody notice that says, hey, I'm interested in doing something different? Being able to give a notice makes just an incredibly huge difference. If you can talk to someone and say, listen, I'm going to walk, but I'm going to do it a couple of weeks early. I need to go in 2 weeks because of the reason. It means so much more to me, and I think it would mean more to the facility. No one's being left in a lurch, but you're saying, hey, enough's enough. That's number one if you can do that. I think that's perfect. Look at what your agency says about penalties on contracts. So many agencies, as I said at the very beginning of this episode, I'm not going to get into an episode about contracts. I will. It's coming. So many agencies right now have language in there that forbid you from ending a contract early, or they'll penalize you. Remember, we're always working a week in advance. So you're working and you've got hours being built up without being paid on them. So agencies have that upper leg on you where they can hold money if they choose to and threaten you to say you're not going to get paid, or there could be housing or travel reimbursement you're not going to get if you walk away. So look at that. Consider that when you're also going for which agency to work for, but look and see what the penalties are for walking away before you decide just to call off and do it. It's important to know your contract. And like I said, I'm not going to get into it right now. Full episode on that coming up very, very quickly. If you've been able to talk to somebody, I think that's still the best way to go. One of the last things I want to talk about in this episode is just be professional. No matter where you are in this process, and no matter how difficult things are for you, being professional is going to go such a long way with how things look for you in the very near and distant future. With that agency, with that facility, with that vendor. And remember, just because you don't like the hospital and you don't like the agency doesn't mean the vendor's not keeping track of you, because you might be switching different companies and switching different hospitals, and they're going to say, this person never finishes an assignment. There's so many people watching right now. You got to be really, really careful. So what does that contract say about me walking away? And am I able to do that? And can I stay professional while I'm actually going through this process? And I think the answer is yes. I think that has a huge amount a bearing on your future as a traveler, let alone with that company or that hospital, with how professional that you are. It goes along with like tying up loose ends. Look at what your insurance is. What is your final paycheck going to be? Are there any deductions that you're going to be experiencing from your contract? Is there anything that you should be doing to making sure that you've got things you need? Did the agency or the recruiter get your only copy of your resume, or is there going to be a reference that you're going to need down the road that you may or may not going to be able to get? Tying up loose ends is going to be, again, one of the most important things. But guys, at the end of the day, if this assignment needs to be terminated by you, terminate it. If it literally is something that you cannot finish, somebody in this cog, whether it's the agency or the vendor or the facility, should understand why. If nobody understands why, then maybe there could be something that you need to do some introspection on. But the chances are really high that someone is going to get your reason for wanting to end this assignment. And they're going to be supportive of you. And they're going to keep the options open, whether it's to work for our facility again, or it's to work for our agency again. If it's the facility's issue, there's going to be options. So if the answer is to have a quit, make it be the perfect quit, and do the best you can at making sure that you're not destroying or hurting your career. Because I will tell you guys, more and more people are paying attention, and more of the better companies are almost saying, you can't work for me, you can't work for me. And that stinks for a lot of people that are good healthcare professionals, but maybe have, I guess, made a rash decision about walking away from something. And I think many people will regret it and say, I shouldn't have done that, because now I'm not going to work for that company that has every job everywhere. I'm not going to work for that highest paying company. And those are the companies that are going to be the most protective of their brand and are going to be less and less likely to give you a second chance, because they don't need to, because they have too many people scrambling to them saying, I want to work for you because you do pay well, or you've got the best situation going on, whatever that is. You've got more hospitals, you've got a better process, you've got higher pay. Those are the ones you got to be careful of. And I would urge you guys to be careful. Make it the perfect quit. Quit, be happy, put it in your rearview mirror, and move on. And hopefully you've got the support of both your hospital and your agency to be able to do so, if it's just that sort of thing. So guys, as always, I appreciate this. It was short and sweet, but I hope you guys understood the gist of what I was trying to come across with this one. Times have changed, and I think it's time that all of us kind of change with it. It has a lot to do with supply and demand. You should be able to walk away from an assignment, but you should also really consider how to do it and how to do it perfectly. I will catch you next time on Travel Evolved.